Hello there, my name's George English. I'm the Director of Research Through People. And today we're going to be talking to Billy Milligan and his wife Shirley Taylor, as it was. And they're from Ayrshire in Scotland. I wonder if their ancestors were from Ayrshire. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe we'll be finding that out. So Billy and Shirley, why don't you introduce yourselves?
Well, thanks. Good afternoon, George. It's Bill Milligan here. And I met George at a Rotary meeting, and the interest started there. The family, as far as I was concerned, only went back as far as my grandmother, and never thought any more about it until George, during his informative talk, started the how could I say, the seeds being planted that there's more than just going back to my grandmother. And it was there was a lot of surprises which George uncovered during the history. But we'll come across that later. Anyway, over to Shirley.
Mm-hmm. Hi, George.
Hiya.
Again, I met you at, well, it wasn't a Rotary meeting, it was an inner Bill meeting, right, yeah. Although Billy had come back home and told me all about it, and I thought, that's actually quite interesting. It's something that I've always been thinking about doing, but never quite get round to it. You're busy working, you're busy being a mum, you're busy being a grandmother, you're busy doing everything else. So I think I was coming up to be president of Inner Wheel and thought, oh, I need speakers. What's that man's name? Give me his phone number. And that was how we got to meet. And again, very informative meeting. And at that point decided this is something we must do. Now, at that point, when I say we, Billy handed it over to myself and said, that's good, darling. You just go ahead and do my family as well. And thank goodness that we did. And thank you very much, George, for everything that you have found out for us. I knew a wee bit more about my past history than Billy did. His stopped at his grandparents. I was lucky enough to know 3 of my grandparents for a long time until I was in adulthood. So I got quite some of their history. Then, George, you obviously uncovered a lot more about my father's side. And we now know that I'm from, or my family history, the Taylors are from the Orkneys. Now, we haven't been yet, but it is on our bucket list. We will be going. Billy doesn't know about this, but we're getting a camper van, hiring a camper van, because now we have a dog and we can't leave dog at home. Dog will be coming to Orkneys. So it probably will be next spring. And the reason for that is because with the census starting when it did, I need to go back to do church records and things like that. So we'll come back onto that later. I've got to say my family history was a bit more exciting than yours.
I've got to agree.
My maternal gran I knew very well, Annie Riddicks as she was, and she was born in the US of A, which I always felt was very grand because it made me a quarter American. I used to tell my friends. I didn't know a lot of the history of that though, and you filled that in. Obviously, the Gebby part wasn't quite as exciting. No, my Papa Gebby, Jimmy Gebby's side. Although there was a few wee
anomalies,
details that turned up that some family knew about but didn't speak about. And I think that's just what happens in families. Some things get brushed under the table. Also, I knew that my paternal grandparents, both their mothers died in childbirth, which was obviously a tragedy. They had that in common, and as we'll probably speak about that later. The interesting thing, when I've been telling family, my brother, cousins, mainly cousins, oh, that's great. Can I have a look at your book? And I said, yes, obviously, because you compiled it the book for. Everybody's so interested to have a look, but they then will ask you questions. But when you say, would you like to continue it further for your side? Oh, well, it's something I think I might do later on in life, but not just at the moment. But I certainly have recommended you to many, many people. And hopefully, well, I think we had one cousin, or far removed cousin, one of the Cruthers girls got in touch and added on some things. Anyway, I'll quished for now and let you continue.
That's an excellent sort of summing up in a way. I mean, you talk about talking to grandparents, yes, we all do that. How much do you actually find out or know until afterwards? Some are into, some are not. Obviously, they get exposed and so forth. And yeah, the twist and turn. I mean, what I do remember the first, I think both of you said, we're from Ayrshire, we're Ayrshire born and bred, and obviously Billy said that in particular. But then, as we progressed, we found, and you've already mentioned one or two, and the American connection was fascinating. And one thing I always learn from these things, and I do a number of talks, so I quite often use that example, particularly if I'm talking to Americans and so on. So anyway, what I've done, I've prepared one or two slides. I just put them up, and we can talk or not talk as we go. But I will now share screen so that we can do that. So can you see that okay? Slide?
I can see it.
Yes.
Hey, good.
See my grandparents.
There
That's 4 generations there.
4 generations, yeah. And isn't that lovely, actually? I think as we get older,
so that's your mum and you. Yeah.
That's me. I'm the little one.
My beloved mother-in-law, late mother-in-law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's everybody there is from my mother's side. And I remember my grandfather, my great-grandfather there, but he never said much.
Did he not live across the road from you?
We all, those 3 generations are with me, we stayed in the same street.
Yeah.
So in Galston, in Gateside Road. We stayed in 25 with my grandfather because he didn't do very well after my grandmother died. And then my great-grandfather stayed opposite, I think in number 18, I think it was.
So when you moved to Galston, you would be about 13?
I would be.
So 1963?
12 or 13.
Yeah. No, and again, you're just illustrating, as we're young, we know old relatives and so on and so forth, and things happen to them. And I mean, one thing, now we're getting nearer to the older age. I know people of my age when I was young were ancient, so to speak.
Absolutely.
And I hope we move a bit more freely than that. But so I just put together firstly the the initial, your parents and grandparents and things. And as I say, I go back to this when we started the Ayrshire, and virtually all of these places are in Ayrshire. Cambuslang is obviously up near Glasgow, and then there's this history thing that you already hinted at, that Annie was actually born in America.
Ithaca, yeah.
The biggest shock to me, George, during your investigations, was how close and how often our families crossed. That was the biggest shock to me of the revelations. It was a case of our families at times were neighbours.
At Auchencruive, because they were miners at Auchencruive in the 18 something. You probably can fill that in. That was, and they would know each other. Absolutely, because you're talking about a miner's row, a row of houses, cottages.
Well, don't you think? I mean, mining, was a very important thing for a lot of families, and absolutely. And if one person was a miner, then a number were. And again, I picked out a couple of things coming there. And of course, that's so important. Wouldn't have been my choice of job, but it gave income to millions of people, literally. And you say people knew people, and then by now I've researched so much that quite often I get someone and they're the second or third cousin of someone I researched beforehand.
Well, you took my family back to the 1700s, back to Ireland. And I am the first of that family to make a living above the ground, not beneath the ground.
The first.
Everybody else, every other male was miners.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah, you
dad
grow
was-
up and follow dad into the.
Yeah. And to the pit and the mines and things. And I remember when I was about to leave school, I actually went up to Mauchline Pit to inquire about a job. And my father was horrified. He said, under no circumstances are you going underground. And that broke the generation. As I say, I am the first to make a living above the ground. Every other of my relatives within our traceability was underneath.
Although your dad, Billy's dad, was a pit electrician, so he was down the mines, but he wasn't a miner. He was the electrician down there. So following on for that, he became an electrician, but as he said, above, on land, above land.
Yeah. And for your father, that's sort of, well, easy to say great, isn't it? But, my son, do I want or don't I, and getting an absolutely opposite message to, what we're going on with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My father said he would allow me down underneath once there was windows for me to look out.
Now, a little story I remember came up to do with your great-grandfather, James Shirley. And he lived in Little King Street in Edinburgh, just behind the big shopping centre. And I believe there's a connection with the two of you.
Yeah, well, yes, because we honeymooned in Edinburgh. And the honeymoon hotel was the St. James Hotel, as it was then.
End of Princess Street.
The end of top of Leith Walk, end of Princess Street. And joining on is Little King Street, where my great-grandfather was born. The street is still there. Obviously, there's the name street is still there. It's behind John Lewis. And we found on the news a few years ago, maybe 6 years ago, they was knocking down the centre, what was it called?
St. James Centre.
The St. James Centre was being demolished, and our honeymoon hotel was being demolished. So my husband said, we only had a 2-day honeymoon. We was very poor. Let's go up and let's go to the honeymoon suite. And I was like, all right, okay. So we booked it.
He was always romantic, wasn't he? Yes.
It was very romantic. And I've got to say, I did think this hotel's going to be knocked down next month. What is the honeymoon suite going to be like? And actually, it was lovely. It was very
outstanding.
It was outstanding. It was very nice. And while there, I was doing my genealogy stuff, my homework that you had given me, and found out that knew by that point that James Taylor was born in Little King Street, which was just where we were. I said we ate, I think, that night in our local Italian restaurant, which is the one we always go to in Edinburgh. And then on the second night, what would you like to eat? He says, I think I would like fish. And I says, all right, okay. So I Googled fish restaurants and booked a taxi. And away we went that evening to the fish restaurant. And the taxi driver dropped us off. And lo and behold, the fish restaurant there was tenement houses above it was a typical old-fashioned, the shops and restaurants are downstairs, and there's houses, flats above it. And that was the street that the Taylors moved to after they left Little King Street. They went to the street where the fish restaurant was. And I just felt the whole weekend, well, it was a month, I don't think it was weekend, I think it was a midweek. I just felt I was being guided to the whole, I just felt, and I'm not a spiritual person, but that weekend just felt, these few days just felt so special. Back to the honeymoon hotel and in the honeymoon suite, finding out, walking down Little King Street and then going to the street, and I don't have my paperwork in front of me, where they actually moved to, but being there, and it was the restaurant was under where the Taylors had moved to.
It's amazing, George, how the information that you give us, and then you follow it up, there's a bond, and you can actually feel the bond. How you're stood in the same place, you've looked around the same area, and it just brings it right back to life.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I was an emotional wreck for some of the times. But well, nice.
That's it perfectly. I like the expression walking in your ancestors' footsteps. Absolutely. And exactly as you say, and I mean, I've been to places where 400 years ago, it doesn't matter, but not a single house or building remained from 400 years ago. But standing there, exactly as you say, whereas, you know, in this case, and, you know, I know you said that, we had no idea that great-grandfather lived round the corner. But
I know.
No, it's a lovely story, I think. One of the things, Keisha, our ancestors lived through history. And so there were various big events that happened that may or may not have affected family. But in Scotland, of course, there were the Highland clearances. Yeah. Many of your family who were affected by that. Quite often now I get people from overseas who were affected by that. But the biggest factor in Britain over the years has been the Industrial Revolution. And I find it interesting, the Act of Union 1707 took place just before the Industrial Revolution took off. And we could debate nationalism and all the rest of it. But by and large, economically, it's been a tremendous success because Scotland has contributed a lot to the Industrial Revolution and equally benefited a lot. But people were living typically in the country, working on the farms, and gradually through this that they moved around. And certainly your people did. And mining, coal, of course, was such a key ingredient in feeding that industrial growth. What went with it was the British Empire. And again, I don't know much about your family, but again, quite often I get people who left Britain at a certain time and never born and come back. But you already mentioned Ireland. And this amazing thing in Ireland that people were so poor, they had one foodstuff, the potato, and they had 6 years of potato blight. So the famine was dreadful. 1 million people died, 1 million people emigrated, and a lot came across to the west of Scotland. And, you know, regularly I meet people who've got at least one person and maybe more that comes into that. But let's say, again, put up a couple of things and you could say some things. Now, there's one or two interesting things here, but they're the Milligan side, as you say, Bill, Ireland on that. Well, any comments about the people here?
Oh, well, not really. As Shirley points out to me regularly, my side is boring, mainly because it's either mining or pub duties, shall we say. But when Shirley talks about her family, they've went to Egypt, and well, I'll let her fill in.
Actually, I've just seen there, we have friends in Liswalt. So James Watt, born 1846, Liswalt, Wigton. We have friends in Liswalt. It's a tiny, tiny village past Stranraer. I never noticed that before.
Did you notice that James appears more than once in this?
I was just, there we go again.
No, so James, it's interesting because or not say immediately actually, or illegitimacy, but no, here we have, in the old days, they had Jessie born 1867 and Mary born 1875, who married different men, Henry Milligan and James Blair, and then there must be about second cousins or something, isn't it? But that's right. Allowed.
But the nucleus of travelling was very, very short, because it was all basically within walking or horse distance. And you had to be quite wealthy to have a horse. So literally everybody was on foot. So your nucleus of friends and acquaintances is very, very limited. Hence, my grandmother and grandfather being related and married. So
And
as I
some
say,
people never went more
Shirley,
than 10 miles from their home. It's just amazing.
yeah, Shirley always has this smile on her face when she talks about her family and my family.
Yeah, well, you've mentioned that before. We'll just let that go.
Well, and well, there's the mining thing, isn't it? I just put in the occupations, miner. And in fact, they just, we could chat or not, but, I thought I'd just put in a bit coal mining in Ayrshire. And of course, there were particular areas where there was mining, and your ancestor was Dreghorn, Kilwinning, St. Quiver's is down there, isn't it? Dundonald.
Yeah.
But it's just amazing. You look at the number of communities there, and Miners' Row. Really the first type of sort of employee-provided housing. Pretty basic in many cases, but
primitive is more the word. But Shirley's ancestry is worldwide compared to mine, and that was quite a shocker to me. My family is not adventurous, obviously, at all.
Well, the younger ones are. You've got cousins in Canada, so you had an uncle that emigrated in the 60s or 70s, but yeah. And it's interesting.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
It affects things and all the rest of it, etc. That we could argue pros and cons, couldn't we? But
as I said at the beginning, George, whenever I think of the family, it only goes back as far as my grandmother, who got the telegram from the Queen,
which we have.
Yeah, we've got that.
We have that. We've been honoured to be given it. So, and we've got three children. So, who gets it? Is it the oldest one, who's a girl? Is it the middle one, who's a boy? Is it the youngest one, who would lose it? It's definitely not her. One of these things. Who do we pass this on to?
You're pretty distinguished. Even the Queen knows about your family, doesn't she? Does that apply to Shirley's family?
Well, her auntie's 94.
Aunt Mary? No, Aunt Mary's 96, and she's out walking every day. So yeah, she'll probably get one from the King.
But that's pretty special, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, here's Mum and Dad, and
yeah. To me, this is typical. There's a family photo, the couple getting married with the parents and all the rest of it, and sure enough, the names, of course, that there's John and Susan getting married with their parents in the back. And of course, kind of from my point of view, people have these photos and we start, and then obviously what we're looking at is going back in time. And again, we've got back the same people where we've got this Ayrshire connection, of course, some Cambuslang from Glasgow, and there's Annie, who we're going to come to in a moment. Literally, just put this in, but it's interesting. People ask, well, what do the actual documents look like? So, their marriage document. And what's intriguing, briefly, you may know, official registration started in England and Wales in 1837. It was another 18 years later, 1855, when it started in Scotland. You wonder why, and there's reasons actually. But the good thing when they started, every one of birth, marriage, and death records have both parents on. And of course, one of the things I'm trying to do is make sure I'm tracking back with the right people. So here we have James says what he does. He's a coal miner. They marry, in this case, in Glasgow. And here they say what religion, maybe religion, or in this case, it's just in the presence of people. There's Rabina, Mr. Spencer, give their ages. We talk about Miners' Rows. So James is living Loudon Rose in Galston. She's up in Cambuslang. And then parents. Now, here in 1919, so he's a sergeant in the Highland Light Infantry.
Yeah.
And almost certainly he'd been in the Highland Light Infantry in the First World War. And this was him still there, etc. But again, from my point of view, it gets some of that, we go and find out further. Or you may know, and very often I find that things from 100 odd years ago, people in the family have, I remember Dad saying something about that, or, have got a bit of an idea perhaps. There's Teeny and Carruthers, and was that Steph Graham, the collection? Because he's got Carruthers collections that you mentioned a bit earlier, I think.
Well, my great-grandfather, his mother died in childbirth as well. So he was brought up at the Loudon Road. No, sorry. My grandfather's mother died in childbirth. So James Johnson Taylor's wife died, giving birth. So my grandfather, his Crothers brought him up as one of her own.
Right.
She had a James Crothers. So my grandfather was James Taylor. But in Galston, being Galston, he was known as Tyler Crothers. So not Taylor, but Tyler Crothers. And it wasn't really until he got married that he then became his proper name, which was James Taylor. So, which allowed his father to go back to the army. And as far as I can make out, he was just in the army. He was in the Suez Canal, the building of that, where he met his second wife.
And that's the Egypt connection that you were talking about. Yep.
So and then I think he was in the Inniskillen, an Irish regiment.
He was theirs, yeah.
The story that we were all told as grandchildren from Grand Taylor, Robina Taylor, was that the family had went on to remarry. He had a second family, and they stayed in London. And that after the war, they had tried to trace the family and couldn't. So we thought during the Blitz of London, the Taylor family, the second Taylor family, had been, bombed out. And it wasn't until your research realised, I think my gran actually had I don't think she liked her father-in-law. And I think for that reason, she decided in her head she would just
make up a story.
And indeed, he did have a second family, and they came to live in Scotland. Or I believe when his second wife died, he came near to Glasgow to live. And indeed had his two boys, went on to stay there, had family. He's buried up there. So Granny had just decided that she would just add on to the story. We don't need to go and look after these people because they're not actually there, and indeed they were. So that's another another avenue that I need to go down.
There's lovely. I mean, you've got half a dozen lovely examples of what happens and the things you don't know and the twists and turns that happen. That's good. Actually, we mentioned the American connection, so I think we might just finish off by having a look at.
But it's amazing what comes out the woodwork.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And we start off, and there's some that can, are obvious, shall we say, but there's always twists and turns. No, I thought that this. So I've used it a number of times. This American story is amazing. So the Dunlops, as the line was there, were back in Ayrshire, and again, amazing. I can research these days around the world. So I found the American census says in 1880 they're living in Pennsylvania, and you can see here Hugh Dunlop, brother-in-law, John Dunlop, nephew. So obviously Grace Dunlop from Scotland has married William McDougall. They've gone over to Pennsylvania, and here in 1880, her brother Hugh, age 50, minor, and his son John have gone over, and they're living over there in Pennsylvania with the McDougall family. And if you come back, here's how they fit in. So there's Hugh Dunlop. His son is John, and in due course he marries Marion
McIndoe.
But both born in Dreghorn, but they actually marry over in Pennsylvania because it was a rich mining area. And I found that quite often happened. The Scots, but English as well, would go over to America perhaps 5 years, a few years, higher rates of pay and so on and so forth, and then come back. And there's the daughter. Yes, she's born in this. I think Morris Run is a lovely name, but apparently very much was a mining area. And then Isabella, in due course, marries 1905 back in Scotland. And William, in fact, had Irish ancestors. That was York. Ruddock was the name. And then here's Annie. So she's born in 1907. And moving on 20 years, the centre's back in this country. There's John and Marion, born in Dreghorn. The first three children are born in America because they've got married out there. And then clearly they've come back to Dreghorn, and the next three are married over here. And I just put this in passenger lists. The last sort of 10 or so years, they become so much more available. And so you can track people moving around. I mean, not easy to read all of this sort of stuff, but you get quite a bit of information on the family very often, and certainly the connections and so on. But what was amazing, I eventually found five passenger lists with family on. And I'll come back to that in a moment. And then I was able to get Annie's born in America. So I was able to get her birth record from Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Name of father, mother, and so on and so forth. Minor again. Not a connection. But yes, these passenger lists. And it's almost like, I use the expression about a jigsaw quite often. We know bits and pieces, and can we find out how does that fit? But it's amazing when you go back to this story. So there's John going over probably on his own in 1879. So he's 21. In fact, that's what he went with Hugh or whatever. And then wind the clock on 1906. So William and Isabel married, I think, in 1906. And then, sorry, that's John. William and Isabella, they go over in 1907, and Annie's born in 1907 in America. Most certainly Isabella had been pregnant on the ship going over. But then I found this, this Marion comes back twice, and she's got something like 5 or 6 kids with her each time. And I've no idea what the fares were like in those days, but it can't have been that cheap, can it, to have 8 people coming? But clearly she's coming back to visit the family back in Ayrshire before she goes off. But there's an amazing story there. And I mean, 20 years ago, I almost certainly couldn't have found this story.
So would any of the Dunlops at that time, would they have to go to Ellis Island at New York and be there?
Typically,
and the reason I'm asking, we were in New York 6 years ago. Yeah. And we went to Ellis Island. Sorry, it was longer than that. It was 10, must have been 10 years ago, before any of the genealogy had been revealed. And we went to Ellis Island, and I was looking for the name Riddocks. Right. And now I realise I was probably looking for the wrong name. If it's at the same time, I should have been looking for Dunlop. Right, or Ruddock. Irish, they weren't all that popular when they came over. So quite often they would change the name slightly to make it more Scottish or English and so on. Because you see, the name was Ruddock. Right. Riddex as such. But it sounds more English, doesn't it? But and Castlegar, it's amazing in a way, because the so many people recorded going into America, so the records are there, and we can find things. Oh, that's been an excellent discussion. I think we'll sort of wind that up about now. But I mean, what's lovely for me is that you're getting lots out of it, and we can carry on discussing this for quite a time, can't we? But it's good. It's endless. Sorry? It's endless. Yeah. I just sort of feel it. What did you think about the service from myself and research? Oh, first class. Absolutely, 100% recommend you to anybody that's either starting out or have started and got stuck or have no idea where to start. You're the main man for us. Absolutely. And as far as value for money is concerned, I think considering the hours that you've put in, the value for money is excellent. You must be in a rate of pennies per hour for what you've uncovered. Don't say that. He'll put his prices up. I might need them for others. I can say, on that note, we shall finish. But that's been really interesting. Thanks so much. Really enjoyed it.